And here we are. What a guest. I've been waiting all year for this particular guest who is not in the space industry, but is very much affiliated and very much touching it nearly every day. It is my colleague and friend, Beth Carr. Welcome to the show.
I am so happy to be here.
Me too. We've waited. We have tried to schedule this many, many times. So here we finally are.
Yay.
Before we start, I'm going to give you a quiz. You ready?
Okay.
We're going to do two truths and a lie.
Okay.
Okay. Both Beth Carr and Beth Mund, the Beths, they're both, which one? You're going to guess which one is the lie. Ready? We've both worked in Poland. We've both worked on Broadway, and both our names are Beth.
Let's see here. I would say number two, working on Broadway.
Okay. You think that's the lie?
It might actually be the truth. I mean, are you sure your name is Beth?
You have such an interesting background. We have so much in common, but I do want to start with that. It's just so intriguing. You have to tell us how your career began, and we'll get into where it took the turn, but
Sure.
you've been on Broadway.
Yeah. I was a fabulously underemployed actor in New York in failed productions on Broadway. But I gave it a really hard try for almost 15 years in New York.
Wow.
Um, and the first seven, I was fortunate enough to be a paid actor. Let me put parameters around that. That was $200 a week before taxes,
Yes.
before my first Broadway show. And then, yes, it was union scale as a pit singer and an understudy
Oh,
in a lot
cool.
of Broadway shows that opened and closed within 3 weeks.
Open
Um,
and closed within 3 weeks.
yes, the fate of many performers in New York. Um, we hear the glamorous stories, um, but I felt very fortunate. That career helped lead me to be able to take the power of performance, the power of words and monologues, and being
Mm,
able to illustrate stories through visuals as well as verbal ways of
I bet.
story and movement,
Yeah.
to be able to segue into becoming a brand strategist, designer, plotter, and story brand guy.
Love it. And so you also met your husband on Broadway, right?
We were in an off Broadway production.
I see. I
Yes, but
see.
yes, we met in a show.
So cool. That's so
Mhm.
great that you get to
Yeah.
share that love and that journey. And it certainly was a journey because we've been friends a while. So I know a little bit about where you've been and how you've come into your wonderful talent as a story brand um, representative, certified story brand expert. And can we just share with the audience so we can all have a laugh at my expense? How desperately broken I was when I came to you, and how patient and kind. I really want everyone to know this because oftentimes, when you go to the expert, I think a lot of people oftentimes are like, I already know, I just need a little help. That was not the case. you were you were beyond I was beyond help, and yet you still stepped in and you were beyond patient. And do you get that a lot? Do you get a lot of like totally exasperated people who have tried the things and they're done. They're done and they want to be able to put their talents in the world and get going, and they just are so stuck, or they've tried the things. How you must have these folks coming to you as the expert, and then you must have seen like more than one over the years.
Yeah, I mean, in my very long career as a marketer and brand designer, so over 17 years, I've seen it, especially when I would work in fast-paced ad agencies or at big corporations where I help them rebrand. But when opening up my own agency in 2020, it actually is heartbreaking how many Visionary CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs, when scaling their business, will be over promised and under delivered too. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are certain people in my industry in marketing and branding that they may be really experienced, but they don't know how to deliver, or they overpromise and then don't show up with the goods. And so people like you, Beth, are giving a lot of really hard earned money and deeply investing and then getting really nothing to show for it, or something that makes them their brand unrecognizable and not elevated in their difference maker. And so I didn't think you were hopeless. When I knew you, I just thought, oh no, another incredible human and founder and visionary that has been flattened and exhausted and beaten down by those that thought that they would deliver more and did not.
And it must be so frustrating for you too, because when you see these people coming to you, you're like, this is happening a lot. And you had to go through it yourself too. We've all been burnt. We've all had our journey and we've all had a path where doors are shut and we've had to make that pivot. And it's not easy, but to reinvent yourself over and over again. But when you find what works or you implement the strategies that do work, which is a perfect segue into, can you please tell me how you found StoryBrand?
It's very interesting how life will just lead you down paths that you don't even know at first what the destination is. But I was already branding, elevating, and revolutionizing a lot of different companies. And at that time, I happened to be completely rebranding a bootstrap startup that was working towards setting themselves up to sell um, and possibly get investment, but they were looking to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had to really assess all the different aspects of their brand and also the acquisitions that they had brought on where they weren't matching brand in identity and messaging, et cetera. And um, I, I always talked about when we elevate a brand, the brand is not about you, was always my message anyway, because as a Broadway performer, how do you connect with the audience? Well, it's the same thing in brand and marketing. How do you invite people into their own story? So I am a huge podcast listener. And at the time, I had a very long commute. My round trip was about 2.5, 3 hours a day. So how do I entertain myself? Well,
Oof.
I'm going to be transported into other people's stories through podcasts. It just so happened that that particular podcast, as I was walking my mile from the ferry that I would take every day to commute,
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a podcast that Donald Miller of StoryBrand appeared on. And his opening line was exactly what I've been saying. When you're marketing, sorry to say it, but the story is not about you, it's about your customer. And I stopped dead in the middle of commute hour. People were like, why are you stopping in the middle of the
Right,
sidewalk?
right.
Because I was just gobsmacked that
Yeah.
this voice from somebody I didn't know at the time spoke straight into my heart as well as how I was talking about it. And so, of course, it was the pre-launch to his book, Building a Story Brand.
Ah,
So then he talked about, I think this was in October, and he said, oh, in January, you could pre-order now. January, you'll get your book.
yeah,
And
very
I
mhm.
immediately ran to my office.
Yeah.
I was always there early. And I immediately threw open my laptop and ordered that book and then just started to stalk Donald Miller and everything that he wrote and all the podcasts he was on to just absorb more of his incredible knowledge. And so then
Same podcast, found him on podcast, found you through the story brand marketing and branding um
live stream.
sessions.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
live stream.
And I was like, what? There's an opportunity to have this incredible one on one coaching because that is what I need. I was already on board like you, I was avid listener, religiously devoted to his lessons, his approach, his mindset. Yeah, and when it hits you and you know there's some other creative in the world who's doing it successfully, but it's also
Yeah,
the way you've been doing it or trying to all along, you're like,
yes.
I just want to align with that and hold it and see if it works. And when I saw, I think, I don't know that we had a choice. I think you were just our host branding strategist that
Yeah,
day.
I was picked as your coach in a room with seven other people, seven other
Yes.
founders and entrepreneurs.
Oh, those poor other seven.
Not at all, Beth. You were
Because I was
so
like, I have a question. Wait, time out. Can I wait? That's like, okay, we're going to continue and keep going. You kept us on track. And I will forever applaud you for that because I think all of us were just so absorbing it all and taking it in. But you brought the insight and then these one offs where you were personally adding your reference point and your experience. And that was just as valuable as the course itself, but we just wanted to engage with you so much more because it was that wonderful breakout one-on-one where you're validating, you're encouraging, you're explaining, you're going beyond. And I was like, this is exactly what I needed, but I didn't know what I didn't need or did need. And so
right.
you and I just remember that email. Do you remember that email where I was like, it was like right, right after. I think it was either during a break. I maybe even emailed you live. And I was like, okay, listen, how do I work with you beyond today? I absolutely must work with you because your name is Beth. You're totally awesome. And I need to just go deeper. It was either an email or like a chat. And then there it was. It was just the spark that lit the flame.
Yeah.
And that was what, 3 years ago? Four? It was a while.
Oh, wow. That was 2021.
Oh my gosh. Was it? No, it was before that because when I did my Hawaii analog, I think we were just coming together. I think
When
so.
was that? 2020?
2020. Yeah. I know it's been.
Near the end of 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So full circle now.
Hmm.
You have fully, I mean, you had just become this brand manager, but independent. You were a couple years independent. Then you started the certified story brand. And were you just like, this is everything I've already enjoyed and appreciated, and I'm going to take it to the next level? And you must have just dove in. When did you get certified? Was
Yeah. So after serving all these companies and helping them raise millions and millions of dollars in VC money or help them sell, we're talking 32 million for the VC funding, over 100 million in the sale of the company that I just mentioned when hearing Donald Miller for the first time. And I just knew that I wanted to become certified by him. And at the time, you could go to Nashville and be hand trained by him and his colleague, Dr. JJ Peterson. And so I did. So in 2019, after being abruptly laid off 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, after
oh,
helping that startup raise more than $32 million, I
yeah.
decided,
Happy Thanksgiving.
well, I decided, this is an opportunity to carve my own path and choose myself. And in doing so, I can serve many, many other CEOs and companies that really want to scale, whether they are a startup and they even need brand naming, all the way to they've been in business for a year and a half, and they're like, marketing isn't quite working, or we've grown so much that our marketing and our sales aren't getting along. And what we need is somebody to come in here and give a strategy eye, a creative eye, help us do the work, help us be guiding us in our work. And so, yeah, so in December of 2019, so I'm now entering year 4. In December of 2019, I officially became a certified StoryBrand guide. And then that following year, February of 2020,
Mhm.
I opened up my brand and marketing agency, Fortified Branding.
Wow. I got just in time. The universe aligned. I was so grateful.
Yeah.
And I hear you and I hear your powerful experience in, even when you're not around, the lessons you've taught me resonate. And I think of things that you say, like, okay, what is the call to action and what is the thing that you're serving and how is this translating to the audience, to the customer, to the people you're guiding. And I do that now in my emails, in my sleep, in my communication. It is like a solid foundation. It was always there, but you brought it to the surface in everything we've touched over the years, every single piece of, whether it's communication piece I'm putting out, whether it's a website I'm designing, whether it's an entire strategy or a whole campaign, you and the voice that you have and the manner in which you approach and your methodology is like ingrained, embedded in the way I'm working in the story brand world. So thank you. And also I want to talk about the power of story because, and now we've done a little bit about your story and your journey.
Hmm.
Let's dive into story and why it's so important. We have communication, we have marketing, we have branding. And sometimes a lot of people, especially executives, they're like, it's all one thing. It's all the same. It's all outreach. It's all advertising. They couldn't be more different. And now more than ever, the power of story is becoming more evident. So
Mhm.
other than clients like myself, when you develop these stories and the client works with you to bring out their story, you said the best thing ever, which is foundational to StoryBrand. It's not about you at all. It's about who you're serving and who you're providing for. Walk us through how that was foundational, but also how you guide that. How does one guide that? I know there's a method and you pull it from them, which is sometimes painful, to be honest. Um,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
think sometimes people are like, this is my widget. This is what I sell. What do you mean there's a story? The story is this is $4.95 and I'm trying to sell it, but
Yeah.
there's more.
There is, and I think so. And I love your question, Beth, because it's there. I actually see it kind of threefold, right? So, what is the importance of story? Well, story is the vehicle to be able to transport people into another world, into space. It transports them in imagination. They can visualize what you're saying, even if they're very analytical and not a visual person.
Yes.
So there's a transportation that happens. And when you are able to transport somebody, whether it's through a book or your podcast or a blog,
Or a
um,
Broadway show.
yes, then um, people are able to detach possible thoughts or a mindset that they might be stuck in so that they can see things from a different perspective. So that's the importance of story. How do
Mm,
I pull it out? Well, when somebody comes, let's take your widget example, and
sure.
they're like, "Yeah, but I'm selling this widget and it's $4.99." And they, as a bonus, they also get some Ginsu knives for 99 cents. Um, the power of that is okay, that's great. So, what you, Mr. Widget, wants is to be able to sell your item for $4.99. But why?
Mm,
Besides making money, what in the heart of you, why did you create this? What is it solving? What is the
yes.
pain that happened that made you invent this widget?
Yes. And that is it. That is what can be so painful, Beth, and so powerful at the same time. That is what hurts when I hear you ask. And I'm being dead serious. And it's funny because it's true. It hurts because that process of like, okay, but why did you make the widget? Because people need it. Why do people need it? Because people don't have it. Well, why don't they have it? Because they don't think to get this for themselves. Why? Are they short on time? Are they short on resources? Is it a garlic press where you could cut it with a knife just as easy,
Right?
but if you don't want it on your fingers, it's
Right.
4.99? It's
Right.
like getting to the why can be so hard and challenging. And yet, once you have that, here's what I love that Donald Miller says all the time. It is not the story of how you founded the company and your great grandfather and the people and the special
Yep.
building and all the things. And that is the story. I think a lot of people have a lot of pride and they're very, which is good. It really shows you the value of what they're doing in the world. But that is not the story we're talking about. It's funny how story and solution go hand in hand.
Yes. And the story about your grandfather opening up the store in 1932 and he immigrated here and hard worked and created this incredible industrial landmark, all of these things, right? That is an incredible story, but that doesn't attach into the audience's mind on how you're going to help them thrive or survive.
That's
And
right.
so when you can talk about, well, when my grandfather came here in 1932 as an immigrant and built this, it's because he saw that people really had a lot of difficulty cutting garlic. Their hands would smell for days. They would cut themselves. It would burn. And so he created this garlic press that, right? Whatever that story is.
Yeah.
Um,
And a garlic press is worth so much more than $4.99.
right.
For real. And
For
I
real.
didn't know this until I had one. I've been asking for one for like 10 years. 10 years, Beth. I finally all my ladies that I coffee with every now and then, they're like, "What do you mean you don't have a garlic press?" I'm like, I don't. I just and they're like, "But you smell like we can smell it on you." I'm like, "Yeah, I
Right.
just made
That's why
garlic
we're
too."
sitting over on this side of the coffee table, Beth.
And I was like, "Is this a problem?" They're like, "Yeah." And they were like, "How do you not have one? Like, why don't you just buy yourself one?" And I'm like, "I just don't." And I finally have one. And now I couldn't, how did I not have one all these years? But I love that you have to sit with the why, and people don't. They're like, "Oh, I know everyone's going to love this. Everyone's going to be on board." And that's a bit brazen and bold to think like everyone thinks what you've got is great, and maybe they do. But also, if you can't explain that part of your story, then it's really missing a big it's missing that connection, like you said, with the people who are going to invest in you and your
Yeah.
widget.
Well, and also, I also love what you said, Beth. Like, we think that everybody understands because it's in our head. We understand it.
Yeah.
But that is what we call, well, Donald Miller calls it the curse of knowledge. And what I call smelling your own self exhaust and thinking it's right. Like you don't know what is outside the room
Yeah.
until you step out of it. And so
Oh,
by
yeah.
asking why or by putting yourself through a narrative framework that allows you to talk about what transformation and what success is and what the character's desire is, the audience's desire. What it allows you to do is be able to see from a different perspective, a different point of view where you're standing. And so you realize then, oh, not everyone thinks like me or sees this product the way I do or understands why I created this.
Such knowledge there. I cannot wait to pull those quotes and highlight them because I hear them from you and I have to like go back into my notes and be like, "Yep, Beth said this." I have so many. You've been to my house. You know that I have Beth quotes in my office because they're powerful and you know what you're talking about. And as much as I say it's difficult and sometimes it's hard when we're working on this, I want to go back to what you said. And we both said about like, well, everyone in your head, this is your perspective and you think it's great. And I think the challenging thing is, yes, you have that curse of knowledge and you're like, I know that this is going to be well received or appreciated or used or afforded. And yet it's so hard when you're that invested to get to that why. And when you and I have sat together before in our power moments, I'm like, what do you mean, why? What do you mean? It's space. We are literally talking about space exploration. And you're like, and I'm like, and it's cool. And you're like, and I'm like, what do you mean? And so, which I love because like Broadway is pretty cool too. Science is pretty cool. And maybe, and I know I'm being facetious, maybe people think politics is cool. I don't want to go there, but to each his own, right? Everyone has. And if you're in politics, oh my word, if you're in politics, there's really no question why. Like you're in it because,
Yeah. Well,
uh-huh,
let's not even fully enter politics except that um the we know that leaders that have won the right to be voted in to a very high powerful position
are
all over
good
the world
storytellers.
are great storytellers and or they have really great marketing campaigners that know how to tell a story.
True. So true.
um but I also love what you said about space, Beth. So, you know, I and my team at Fortified Branding, we are very picky about who we take on because we fully dive in with our clients, and we are with them the whole entire way. There's never a moment where you feel abandoned on your path. We truly are guides and solutionists, and we are fountains. We pour into you as you pour into us.
Mm.
And with that, with space, one, I always dreamt of wanting to be an astronaut until I realized I wasn't good at math. And two, when you said, yeah, I'm an analog astronaut and I do this incredible podcast and all the other things that you do around space and your incredible knowledge, to me, I think science and space, unfortunately, really good stories have not been told. We either have science fiction
Yeah.
or we have news press moments where somebody, a scientist is talking about incredible breakthroughs that are happening, but they're not in layman's terms. So people are not invited into the story. Why do people love sci-fi? Because they're invited into their own fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so space and science, there's such a huge opportunity to be able to start tapping into those stories and making them much more approachable so that the audience wants to join along,
Yes.
support, sponsor, fund, follow, fly, whatever
Yep.
it is.
So true. It breaks my heart that there are these stories like Hidden Figures and Apollo 13 that are these famous movies and books. They
Yes.
have been the stories all along, and people really resonate with the heroism of Apollo 13 and Hidden Figures. But I worked at NASA, and right under my feet, I mean, I wasn't there at the time that a lot of women struggle. Well, that's not true. I've been there to see all kinds of things, but I feel like stories like that were always present, and even us as employees didn't know, and we
Mhm.
just didn't know. So these stories that people want to resonate and connect to, they're there. And I think it's really brave for people to find them and present them and share them. And I have to give the kudos back to you because even though I had these stories, Beth, and people on the podcast are giving me, I mean, what a sacred thing to share your story with me. I had no platform, I had no method, I had no sharing, I had no connection, I had no red thread that I could tie through them all and continue to point back to like, what are these stories doing? Well, they're connecting us to space.
Yeah.
Great. How? And so you really served as my guide on that and why that matters and story
Mhm.
matters. So it did help me to be a good communicator anyway. But I think people who are focused on growing a business, people who are focused on the bottom line, people are focused on paying the rent and their paychecks, for them to step into trying to also be a good storyteller can be maybe not as high as a priority, and yet it's so important to connect to the people you're serving. So it's really, like you said in the beginning, so many of these people have been underserved in the value that they could be providing. They just didn't know the how or the methodology or the strategies.
Mhm.
And that's what you've done. That's what you've done. And you do with your clients. And that's why how nice it is for you to have the choice in the clients you get to work with instead of the company that laid you off before Thanksgiving. No
Yeah,
names.
but that was such a gift.
It
That
was
it
a
was such a
gift.
gift.
Yeah.
It is a message actually I just sent out during the holiday season at the beginning where I said, "Welcome to layoff season." It is very common now for corporations to, in the fourth quarter, cut their staffing and project for the next year. And I actually, even though it feels really painful, anyone who's listening to this and you have been recently laid off and you feel really, you're dealing with maybe feelings of rejection or being devalued, uh,
Mhm.
I hope you dig in and find what lights you up. What is the joy? It's probably the biggest gift that this company laid you off because it may be opening up other portals to a new career, a different career path, a different way of expressing your talent. Um, and so I just say, you are not stuck, you are still. And I hope in that stillness you find those little threads of joy and happiness and figure out then how you can make money off of that.
Ugh, love that. I hope people really do hear that because it is this tough time. It's tough. More words of wisdom from Beth Carr, including knowing your value. And one of the things we say together that I do want to get into a little bit before we jump back into space is sometimes I say it, I think sometimes you say it too, is we put our big girl panties on. Or maybe it's me. Maybe I say that. But what
I
Beth,
think you say
I think I say it. One of the Beths. But
that.
I love being able to say it with you because I have found that so many of us as women underestimate our worth. And you have been an ambassador and an encourager for so many women, especially women business owners, to say, no, no, you are undercharging. You're not, you've given all the time you need to give on this particular thing. If they want more, they pay you more. You're like that wonderful, gentle reminder of worth. And we need women like you, Beth, and other women in the industry to help remind us of that, because I cannot tell you how many people, both of us, I think, have come into our own businesses and saying, looking again at saying, yeah, this is more than my time and energy and wisdom and knowledge that I'm applying that is necessary. So I should be rightfully reimbursed for everything I'm doing that is of value that I'm providing and working hard on. So thank you.
I mean, I think it's very easy for women to societally be taught to not take up space, no pun intended on this podcast,
Right?
but to not take up room. And a lot of times we undervalue ourselves and doubt our knowledge when it is prolific. And I think it's really important to know that your story is unique and what you have to say and your thought process is unique, even if there are other people around you doing something similar.
Mm.
And yeah, in my experience as a minority female, normally one of the only ones in the C-suite leading a brand, there were a lot of times where I was being mansplained or ignored or talked over or sometimes given the floor, but then whatever I was presenting, they did not go with. And it would be very easy to just buy into that.
Or they didn't go with it then, but they did later. And you're like,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what I
And it was
just
their
presented.
idea.
And that was their idea. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I like what you said because, by the way, I'm charging you for this podcast. No, I'm
All
just kidding.
right. Send me
I'm
a
just
link. Let's
kidding.
go.
I'm just kidding. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Okay. Application. The student becomes the teacher for a moment.
Mm.
Joking. Let's get into space. Let's get into space because not that we haven't already, but I can only imagine when you were sitting there and I'm like, so have you ever done you ever worked with a client who's like really into space? And you're like probably thinking like headspace, design space,
Right.
personal space.
Architecture. What kind of space?
So space is so vast. And just like space itself, I came to you with like all the things. I'm like, all the things need fixing, everything about it. But once we worked together and we honed it in, it just got more and more clear who I was serving, what I was doing. It's just been so wonderful. The journey that you've been a witness to and a guide for. And yet I want to hear your perspective because it truly must have been like there's skincare, there's health and fitness, there's widgets, and there's banana bread. But I came to you with such a bizarrely different type of industry that in space industry, a lot of things do not have any immediate ROI, if even a year ROI. Like most things are investments now for 10, 15, if you're lucky, 5 years down the road. So this was a different story approach, I can imagine. So I didn't know you've always wanted to be an astronaut either. Your love of space was just, I guess I just lit the spark and lit you back up again because I never knew
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So a couple things. Yes, my mother, She worked very hard, worked 3 different jobs as a nurse, raising me and my sister alone. And our entertainment, besides, TV,
Yeah.
was she would read us books at night, and they were all sci-fi. And
Really?
so, yeah, my mom let us play hooky to go see the opening of Star Wars. I'm now dating myself, but I was super young when I went to go see it.
Oh my
And
gosh.
the Lord of the Rings and anything that had to do with being able to imagine a different world and universe. Dune was another one. So
Dune.
yeah. Um, and so with that, um, I always just imagined being able to travel in space and be an astronaut. And then when I was 12, an astronaut actually came to speak to our school. Actually, I think it was a NASA engineer came to speak to our
Okay.
school, a rocket scientist.
Sweet.
I realized then that I needed higher algebra than what I was capable of. And, again, that was not really my path. Um, so there's that. So the yes. And then I love what you said, Beth. Yes, when you said, so this is what I do, and it's things about space. Yeah, it was foreign to me, but what could I connect with? Well, that desire to be an astronaut,
Yeah.
that space and science are so necessary. Exploration is so necessary. And because I've built a lot of biotechs, I love science. It fascinates me. And here at Fortified Branding, we love being able to research and find out more. We're also a learning organization. So as we dive in with our clients, we're going to learn all aspects of their industry and ask more questions. I asked you so many questions, but I could fully understand and wrap my brain around your expertise so I could then help guide you in your story.
Yeah. Lots of questions. And I ask you back. And I'm like, wait, why? What? How? How are we going to do that? Okay. Why does science need story, do you think? I mean, the answer seems obvious, but a lot of things like why does business need story? All of these things we kind of being familiar with, story brand, we get it. But
Mhm.
let's
Mhm.
specifically focus on science and space exploration. Why do you think they
Yeah.
need story?
Well, part of it is because science and scientists and space, first of all, it's very hard to be in that industry, to break into that industry,
Yeah,
to have a foothold in that industry. You have to go through a lot of education in itself. And then there's, of course, a microcosm of people, places, things, egos, titles, all sorts of things. Plus, there's also regulations. So it's a very regulatory industry.
sure.
And so with that, that creates exclusion, not inclusion. And
Mm,
depending on your your experiences and growing up, the opportunity, the if there were opportunities, it's very hard. It feels very out of touch from your environment, possibly. Most Americans that I've spoken to, that feels very, very external to them, science and space.
hmm.
But when you can base it in a story with layman terms,
Yeah,
and you can weave it in a place that makes people realize that if they honed their craft, or if their craft as an engineer, right, they too could be a rocket scientist and contribute. Or another one of your colleagues and one of our clients, right, they fly DNA into space.
ah,
Well, how do you tell a story that makes people realize that they too can walk in to that industry with less bars than what seems to be, right? I also think because science is ancient, and space, although a newer industry, now has a history. What we see is it's been very exclusively dominated, and there have been stories told that, oh no, you can't because you need da da da, and so we can. And so that kind of exclusive story continues to be perpetuated. So the
mm,
more you, Beth, in your incredible ways of pulling the thread through how we're connected from Earth to space and how space affects everything here and why all these incredible historical moments are happening, or why there's scientific breakthroughs that we eventually see in space. What you're doing is you're flattening that exclusivity and inviting people to step in.
Truly, truly. You don't have to speak science to love and appreciate science. You don't
Right.
have to have a finance degree to be able to manage your money well. You don't have to be an auto mechanic to understand how you're going to maintenance your car. So, but I think people get lost in the details. I think people get lost in technical references. I think people feel like, and that's such a shame because I couldn't tell you the first, like, I can tell you our closest star, and then beyond that, it's all constellations. And if I pick out one or two, and I'm a space person, so the layman, I mean, it would be who's going to know what an astronomical unit can calculate into in a distance? I mean, that's astronomy. Excuse me. So it's like unless you study it, how would you know? But it doesn't mean you can't be curious, you can't learn, you can't appreciate, you can't enjoy. And I think we found during COVID that science all of a sudden got on the pedestal in a big way,
Yes.
and people took sides, and that's not how science works.
Right.
So I think people are finding that science has a place and a value, and science, I don't want to get on my pedestal either, but I think science is really not, it's not, it's becoming less, people are becoming less literate in science. And that is unfortunate. And I'm not talking about we all have to have science degrees. I mean, science is in our daily lives and it's evident to me. The things you're using, the tools you're referencing, the thermostat on your wall, like there's such
Right.
basic things. So I feel like we can connect a whole lot easier to science, not be afraid of it, not be ashamed to talk about it. I'm glad that we had a community of guides that could help us through whatever your political view was. Doesn't matter. Scientists had to come forward and explain things. We had to understand processes again. We had to understand how germs work. We had to understand how we share and communicate germs. 101. And that's okay. So if we can leave politics out of it, which is pretty impossible these days, but I feel like science, just like I don't do finances without a guide. I have financial help and
Right.
assistance,
Right.
from a banker to a financial planner. So why can't we have scientist
Right.
guides that guide us through our science? Um, when I came and told you about the Stories of Space project, it it had that why. It had that goal. It had that need to share and take away that exclusivity. And it was so evident to me. And it was just a matter of the scale. So now that I had the method and everything you've taught me through the years, I just felt like, okay, Beth, how do I realistically proceed? Because I need the whole world in on this in 6 months.
Right.
And I needed it yesterday. And you were like, yeah, okay, here we go. And you just buckle in with me, and I'm always so appreciative. But I feel like when we talk about space and people connect in their own unique way, um, we are getting their perspective. And when we share perspectives, now we have to raise the bar as scientists, as explorers, as people who are we have to look at things differently to discover them, or else we're never, I mean, that's how we found penicillin, and this happens
Right.
daily. So it was a challenge to do a project like that, and yet we did it. You and I and your team and my team and everyone who submitted a story and continues to do so.
Yes.
And it's the power of that story. And as a story brand guide, I think when we see that come full circle, and I think people are going to be more selective in the way they purchase, in the way they participate, in the way they make investments, in the way they vote because of story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah. And when it comes to space, I feel like we're right there. We're right on the cusp where it's like, yeah, I love space. What's not to love? Okay, now how do you actively step into this to support it? And they're like, oh, well, space is out there and I live here, or
Yeah.
space is like not, it's not in my purview, and it can be, and it can be very simple, then I think more people would be able to step into it, but it is tough. Beth, if you could go to space, what would you pack? Maybe three things. I'll give you a
This
medium-sized
beautiful
thing.
pen.
What? The pen. Was this just laying in front of you, or does it have
Yes.
significance?
No, it has significance.
Okay.
It was a gift from my husband. It's
Oh,
a beautiful substitute for a Mont Blanc, but it has that beautiful kind of weight. And he gave it to me when I opened this agency as a
oh, that is
venue,
special.
write the stories.
I thought you
Um,
were doing the jerk from the movie. This and
all I
this,
need is
and all
this
I need is
bag
this.
and this hair clip. Yeah, so I would say this pen.
I love it. It's
um,
beautiful too. It's red,
Thank you.
bold.
Um,
Pens are everything. I know this sounds crazy, but as a writer, I had a pen that I signed my marriage certificate with. I had a pen that I signed, when I had the
yeah,
kids. I mean, the pen, like the weight and the
pen, the
feel.
weight, the smooth, the weight right. Yes,
Truly,
that's a science.
that is a science.
A science. What else would I take? I would take, of course, a form of a notebook somehow, because how else am I going to write with my pen?
Okay. I'm waiting. That's not what I thought you said. Okay. One more thing. That's totally not what I thought you'd say.
I'm stumped.
I
Uh,
you food. I know you're so good at you're just so good at describing and enjoying and appreciating like a really good meal. I want to know what you would eat.
okay, so what would I eat? That's different than the three things I would take.
I would totally take food. Are you kidding?
Oh, I thought, see, because of stories, I thought it would just be just that water type of food.
Oh yeah, yeah, we'll do that too. But if you could take but if you could.
Okay, if I could, something I wouldn't be able to regrow out in space. Well, there's plenty of that, but um, I love artichokes, so I would.
No, that's what you would take. That would be so smelly.
Is there smell in space, Beth?
There would be if you take artichokes.
Okay,
Actually, Beth, you know that when you ask me a question, I have a space answer.
I know
So
you do.
they said this is true. Astronauts say that space smells like burnt toast.
Burnt toast. That's
It's
what I
the
remember you telling
weirdest.
me. Telling
It's
me. So
the
burnt toast and a very green
artichoke.
chlorophyllic smell like
Okay.
artichoke.
You know what I would take for food?
What?
Samoas. Girl Scout cookies, Samoas, because one, they're totally processed and delicious. So two, they're not going to go stale. Like you can have those 6 months from now, 6 years from now. They'll still be as delicious as when you put them in your
Okay,
pocket.
but if we're gonna get there to process, I would say a package of instant potatoes goes
Okay.
a very long way.
Oh, sure. Okay. Not as tasty as Samoas with chocolate and caramel and
True,
coconut potatoes.
true.
Oh my word. Oh my gosh. Okay. As we wrap up here, um, one of the things I've been wanting for you to share is you have had the ability throughout your career to pivot, reinvent, listen to your voice, listen to your strengths, wrap yourself within your strengths, but also give this wisdom to others. How in the world can you summarize this down to a couple sentences for all the listeners to be like, okay, Beth Carr's done a lot. She's gone from Broadway to StoryBrand, brand guide, and everything in between. They don't even know about everything in between, which is the so many other businesses you've
Yeah.
served and worked for and helped grow and turn around. So how do you know what advice would you give on I would love for you to share how you know when it's time.
Mm.
And I'm just going to leave it open ended like that. How do you know when it's time? Time to grow, time to scale, time to
I
move, time to
yeah.
leave, time
I
to
now I'm gonna get a little bit woo, but that is one of my Clifton strengths. If you haven't taken that test, that's pretty
ooh.
amazing. So one of my top 5 Clifton strengths is woo. Actually, that's the 5th strength. The 4th strength is futuristic. So that makes a
Is
lot of
it? That's why we're
sense.
together.
Mhm.
Space,
So yeah,
future.
and so I would say this, the world, and this I know is a quote, I think from Joseph Campbell, who was a really well-known philosopher. I think he said, and maybe I'm wrong who said it, but the universe is conspiring to help you.
Oh.
And things are happening for you, not to you. And so I would say, when do you know? You know, when you start getting nudges and you start to get excited by another thought. And even because we're human and we have very many aspects, even sides that can be considered darker than lighter.
Mm.
When you get that nudge and you hear somebody else's story and you go, I want that, or you feel a little tinge of jealousy, maybe not of that person, but what they're doing, that is a universal nudge. That is a sign. Huh, what could I do to also be able to achieve that, touch that, create that?
Mm.
Um, when I would listen to other marketing gurus out there besides Donald Miller, like Simon Sinek,
Oh yeah.
I would just say, I know that too. Why are you up there talking? I want to be up there talking.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that spark, that nudge, that gut feel is everything to tell you that it is time to invest in learning more and
Mm.
trying it on. It doesn't mean, if you do still have a corporate job, congratulations, that's fantastic. If it's still working, fantastic. If you love what you do, wonderful. And if you still have this spark, I say, stand on the dock and build your boat on the side. And if or when you're ready, that boat is built, your feet will not get wet as you dive in. Well, not dive in, step into the boat and sail off.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm so
there's
glad
nothing
you
wrong
said
with
that.
experimentation.
That's a great quote. I'm glad you brought that up. And one of the things you said that I love hearing, well, I love that the universe works for you. I don't think I've heard that. I love that. Good reminder. And you know when it's time, this is also something they say when you're building your story, what really gets you frustrated, angry, or like
Right?
what really burns you, right? And if that's a
Yeah.
solution that you can embrace and explain and resolve or solve,
Mhm.
now you know you're cooking with oil, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this thing, it's just, I can't take another thing of garlic. I'm cutting it every day. It's my hands. I put the lotion on, it still smells. And then you finally are like, why don't I have a garlic press? Okay. So for me, I'm obviously so passionate about why doesn't everyone support space and fiercely invest in the future that we have in space exploration the same way I do? Well, because there's a disconnect, because there's an uneven amount of people who can enter, like you've explained. And I'm so appreciative that you've been my guide through this. I love the advice you've given. I love that I listen to my spark and you are so good at listening to yours and encouraging others to listen and acknowledge that spark, because it is a spark. I will tell you, and you've seen it, Beth. I mean, I have to tell everyone listening that there have been moments where you and I were sitting together and you literally saw it either on my face or in my body language or in my eyes, or I was like, there it is. And you were like, there it is. And we just embraced it and went with it. And when we found it, it just all kind of flowed. And but it did have to take the journey to get there, but you're the guide that helps people go along that path to get there. And I'm like, wait, it was there all along. I just needed someone to show me how to get there. People are going to love hearing that quote from you, Beth. I love the two very powerful, more for me to write down. Okay, two truths and a lie is how we started. Now we're going to finish this way. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, for Christmas, we're both going to, now you're going to tell me, this time you're going to tell me the truth, not the lie. We're both going to, number one, have cocktails. Number two, write Christmas cards with a little space in them. And number three, either go get a dog or get something for our dog.
I'm going to say number two again, writing cards with space in it.
Wait, what was number two?
I think you said, drink,
We're going to have
write Christmas
cocktails
cards,
for holidays. Yep, right here around the corner. We're right
get a
here.
dog.
You got a dog. Oh
Got a
my
dog
gosh.
who's being all feisty right now.
Okay. Well, this
So
is the
thank
perfect
you,
time.
podcast listeners, for hearing the little yapping in the background.
No, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. I wish we did because that's so wonderful. Congrats. Do we have
Thank
a
you.
name? Do you have a name?
Same as Ozzy.
Ozzy, like Ozzy Guillen, the famous Chicago Cub.
Sure, Beth, you're Chicago, and I always like supporting you.
Ozzy, that's so cute.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. This was way overdue. We need to do it again. Your wisdom has been shared now. I hope many enjoy and appreciate it and find you. Where can they work with you at Fortified Branding, Beth?
You can go on to fortifiedbranding.com. We normally start with a VIP day. We get all your messaging straight out of the gate, out of the way, so you can own your words and walk into any room confidently.
Yay. You certainly did for me. Thank you so much. Come back on the show in the new year. Tell us
Yes,
what new
please.
stuff. Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Ah!
Okay, let me get
Perfect.
them. Hold on here.
Hey, yeah. Okay, when it comes to the space stuff, it's it's beyond hard. It's beyond hard. It's got to be unique to be a brand manager guide. Do you know anyone in the industry other than me that's like in the Donald Miller world of space communicators right now?
I don't. There is. I actually recommended him to you. He is a story brand. He works at StoryBrand, and he wrote a musical about going to the moon.
You did?
I sent it to you.
Okay, good. Cool.
Yeah,
All right,
I
I'll look.
submitted that as part of your questions.
Yay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll check that out. He wrote a musical about going to the moon?
Yes.
Like Moulin Rouge?
Like Moon Rouge? No.
That's awesome. You know, I tell everyone like when we're kind of holed up on the analogs, I always tell them how important their personal story is. And they're like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, no, 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 no. When you get out of here, you should be thinking while you're in here. And I valued so much like if you can keep a journal, if you can keep your schedule, if you could communicate, not just you can practice with the people back home, like friends and family, but how many people do you know go on analogs? So people are intrigued, they want to know, and you have the power. You have the power of when you get out of that analog to create your narrative because the analog doesn't owe you. The company doesn't own you. You've done this on your own. You've truly done something totally volunteer that you can tell your own narrative. That's an opportunity not a lot of people get. So when I worked with you and I reached out to him, like, how do we do this? And you were like, oh, okay, you're gonna keep a structure, you're gonna make notes, but also you get to really think through like, who am I representing and who's going to appreciate and acknowledge this? And who am I serving? That should have been first, right? Who am I serving? Like the scientists that can't be here, the researchers that don't have this kind of environment or access to it, the people who came before me who started experiments and started this journey and started this analog habitat that's still standing. I like to think of that as part of my narrative because nobody does anything alone. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. But that sure was tricky to think about building a narrative around an analog experience. One of the
Yeah.
hardest things we've done together in our work. Yeah. Um, what else? Is there anything we didn't get to say or highlight that you wanted to step into, whether it's something coming up for you for projects or things you want to highlight?
Um, just that we have really started to shift our services where people a lot of times also not only are a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs taken possibly with over promise and under delivery, they also they have to wait for ages when they needed
Mm.
it yesterday. And
Oh,
so we do a VIP day experience from VIP day messaging for teams that are less than two to bigger teams, a VIP weekend. We also do a brand identity week. We do brand naming in 3 weeks. So things are very fast tracked because we're so experienced in being able to do it. And it really just helps entrepreneurs and CEOs, whether they're already a medium-sized company or just starting out, be able to just have one less obstacle to success.
that's perfect. I'm so glad you said that. And I would almost challenge whoever takes you up on taking advantage of that service you offer to give yourself a bookend day post event, because you've got to implement those right away, and you've got to hold on to that energy because it is so intense and you work and you get through so much so fast. But you really got to put them in place in the moment or as
Yeah.
soon as you possibly can to start that ball rolling. I would give it a whole nother day. So yeah, put yourself back on that plane a day later, because it's
Yeah.
also exhausting. It's really
A lot
intense.
to process. You have to really absorb it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
We
good.
normally, after that experience, we give 30 days so that it's really sitting with the client and just, you know, it's rolling around like a marble so that they can really know, is this really how we want to say it or position ourselves, etc.
Perfect. Okay, one last question I didn't get to ask you. And I meant to. I woke up this morning, I'm like, oh, that's the perfect question for Beth. What's your favorite story?
Oh,
It can be Broadway, a movie, a book, a poem. It can be anything. But if you had to pick one,
you're gonna laugh. And there's so many incredible stories, and you're having me only pick one.
pick the one
Um,
that's working now, like right now, speaking to you.
Killing Eve.
Is that a show?
That's a TV series.
Why? Why is it your
Why?
favorite?
Because yes, it's about a female serial killer, but it is dark comedy. The female characters are very complex and well written instead of a lot of female characters that you see written are only one-sided or two-dimensional at most. They are deep and profound and funny and serious and scary and exciting. So that's really, really fun.
Ooh, I gotta check this out.
Yeah.
What network?
No, no kids watching.
Oh, of course. Well,
Hulu.
let's start with a serial murder.
Well, but it's a dark comedy.
Okay, got it.
So yes, Killing Eve. And
Okay.
the show won a lot of awards.